Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Jansen. It's great to be with y'all today. I'm from America, in my first year at Holy Family Mission, but I'm very blessed and thankful to be here, experiencing your beautiful country. I'm the oldest of 10 children, so I have a background in organization, kids' games, general older sisterliness, and chaos management. I come from a Catholic homeschooling family, and for anyone who thinks that sounds boring or annoying, believe me, it was actually an absolute party. I got to do school in my pajamas, and I was done with my work by noon. Now, if that doesn't sell it to you, I was part of many different theatrical productions. I read lots of books, played soccer and ultimate frisbee all the time, and I was even in a band called Pippin and the Frogs. Like I said, it was a party. However, as many oldest children can tell you, it isn't always easy being first. I often felt a lot of pressure to perform well, do everything right, and that failure was not an option, ever. My perception of God since I was little was that he was harsh, that I had to prove myself to him, to my parents, and to anyone I wanted to receive love from. I had a very check-the-box type mentality and felt God was measuring me and that I was constantly lacking. I didn't know I was personally loved by God. I think this came from misunderstanding of what I was being taught in my first communion prep classes, feeling like I had to earn my parents' love since they understandably had their own human shortcomings, and feeling like it was on me to keep everyone happy. This all came to a head when I was only 7 years old. I started to struggle with anxiety and scrupulosity and became very withdrawn. I stopped playing with my sisters and wouldn't focus on anything fun. Instead, I lived in constant fear that everything I did was something wrong or sinful, and that at any moment I was going to die and would go to hell. It was absolute torture. Thankfully, my mom started to notice the difference in me and asked what was wrong. At first, I didn't want to tell her because I was embarrassed and it felt awkward, but after a while, it was too much to hold in. I remember spending hours crying to her and trying to get away from the accusing thoughts that would flood my mind constantly. One afternoon, I hit a breaking point where my mom and I were both in tears. I had just felt relief from one lie being renounced when another one hit me like a flood. I collapsed into sobs again and felt like it was never going to end, that the rest of my life would be this way, constantly in fear, running from terrifying and accusing thoughts. I felt like there was a physical darkness surrounding me, attacking me, and that it would never stop. We eventually ended up seeking professional help, which was incredibly difficult to go through. Again, embarrassing, awkward, and scary, especially for an 8-year-old girl. But the tools the counselors gave me to rationally and correctly process my thoughts were immensely helpful. My dad was also a huge help in working through difficult thoughts at night. I would often not be able to sleep, thinking that my soul was in a state of mortal sin and that I might die in the middle of the night. My dad would reassure and rationalize the thoughts with me, and then he'd pray over me. I could usually sleep much better after that. Soon enough, we started to see results. My rational thought process became more stable, and I was able to live life like other kids. I was back to playing with my sisters, having fun outside, and started doing theater and playing music. The anxiety didn't go away altogether, but I had much improved, and these activities were immensely helpful. However, even after this period of healing, I very much struggled to see God as a good God. From a young age, I had thought that I was meant to serve him or else I'd be punished, that I had to check all the boxes to be a good Catholic because that's what he wanted. I didn't realize that I was his beloved daughter, even though I went to daily Mass, prayed the Rosary and Chaplet of Divine Mercy, spent time in personal prayer, and went to Eucharistic adoration. I didn't know that I was really and truly loved, cherished, and honored by the Lord. I knew in my head that God loved me, but not in my heart. Until I went to a retreat called Light the Night. This retreat had the usual standard Catholic stuff, talks from Catholic folks, confession, adoration, and Mass. However, this Mass was different. It was outside, which was dark and cold at that time of year. Being outside helped me pay more attention because it was different, along with little lights held by the congregation and the praise and worship music, which I wasn't used to. Soon enough, the time to receive Holy Communion came around, and we lined up as usual. But that night, when I received the communion host and went back to my place, kneeling in the grass and listening to the music being projected through the loudspeaker, I realized something was different. I knew Jesus was there with me in my heart, and I knew deep down that he was good. I had been struck by the presence of Jesus in me. I felt him, and I knew him in my heart. Jesus knows the desires of my heart, and music is something that I love. The music that night did help open my heart to receiving him in a deeper way, because he knew I needed it. That retreat changed my view of Holy Communion. I knew Jesus was a real person, and that he was present in the Holy Eucharist. I knew it now in my heart as well as in my mind. I didn't always get such a strong sense of his presence every time I received after that, but the memory encouraged me, and I knew he had to be there with me. So things were pretty good. I was about 13 at that point. I continued healing from the anxiety, was making lots of progress, with only a few outbreaks once in a while. I was diving deeper into my relationship with God on a more personal level and would go to Mass daily to encounter Jesus there. I genuinely wanted to have a relationship with him. However, I still didn't see how he loved me personally. I knew he was good now, but I didn't know that he loved me. I knew he loved me generically, just like everyone else, and I knew I was meant to love him. But him loving me personally was a foreign concept. I just didn't even think about it. A few years later, my family decided that my sister and I should try out a new school for high school, the equivalent of secondary school here. I had a lot of mixed feelings about this transition. Being a 15-year-old girl at the time and having only been homeschooled my whole life, starting at a new school was pretty scary. I was actually terrified that I wouldn't be able to open my locker, since being homeschooled, I had never had a locker before. In fairness, though, I was pretty excited for this new adventure. Another big thing that had happened at this time was my mom had just had a new baby, sibling number 9, Maria Jacinta. So I was a bit sad about going to school and not being able to spend all day with her like I had with my other siblings, since when you're homeschooled, you just get to sit around and hold the baby for hours after your mom delivers. But mixed feelings and all, the big day arrived. August 14th, my sister and I started school. And in all honesty, I loved it. I loved the people I was surrounded by. I loved the teachers who were super welcoming. And praise be to God, my locker was not hard to open at all. Everything went very well over those first few days. Then on the morning of Tuesday, August 21st, 2018, not even a week since school had started, something completely unexpected happened. I woke up that morning to see I had slept in, which is very unusual for me. I panicked, as I should have been on my way to school, and jumped out of bed, frantically throwing on my clothes, wondering why no one had woken me up. A few minutes later, my sister walked into the room, and she was crying. "We're not going to school today," she said. "Jacinta died last night." Jacinta, my beautiful 4-week-old baby sister, had died during the night. My mom had woken up to find that she wasn't breathing. My dad had called the ambulance, and they had rushed her to the hospital, but they weren't able to save her. Now, this is the type of thing that happens in movies and in books, but not in real life. I felt feelings that I didn't know existed. It was raw, it was sad, it was crushing, it was surreal. But somehow at the same time, there was this strange and profound sense of peace, that God was holding us. It was like the veil between this world and the next had come so close, and it was so thin, you could almost reach out and touch heaven. During the first few months after Jacinta passed away, that peace stayed. I remember the night Jacinta died, my sisters, my mom, and my dad were all in my parents' room together, crying, comforting each other, holding each other in the very room she had passed away in. I remember running my fingers through my mom's hair as we cried together and tried to wrap our brains around what had happened and what we were going to do going forward. In that moment, I saw my family come closer than we ever had before. No matter what, we knew we were there for each other, and we were going to help each other through this. I think we also really trusted that God was holding Jacinta and that she had gone home to him. I remember my little brother, who was 3 at the time, said to my dad the night before their funeral, pretty matter-of-factly, "We won't be thirsty or hungry in heaven." However, grief can take on many different forms and come up at many different times. As the weeks and months wore on, the grief started to well up, and I didn't know what to do with it. I stopped feeling that same peace I had first had. I stopped trusting, and my anxiety started to come back. I would often get overwhelming feelings of sadness and was very sensitive whenever anyone talked about death. I also found praying very difficult and couldn't hear God's voice. The progress I had made in my spiritual life seemed to be sliding backwards. I thought God had abandoned me and that he wasn't good anymore. Along with this were the other frustrations and challenges every teenager faces, trying to fit in, wanting more freedom, thinking I wasn't good enough. I let myself fall into these unhealthy thought patterns and wouldn't pull myself up. This got so bad that I was struggling to the point where I just wanted to give up completely. I remember one day I was in my room thinking that nothing made sense in my life. I felt like I couldn't believe in God anymore. At the time, I felt like I couldn't, but really, it might have just been I didn't want to. I felt abandoned and alone, stuck and lost in my own head. I hadn't heard his voice in ages, it seemed, and I couldn't understand how he had let something so bad happen. I'd always believed in God up until then, but now I wasn't sure. My heart wasn't sure, my head wasn't sure, and I'm the type of person who likes to have everything in order and understand it all. But the things me and my family had always believed, the relationship with God I had invested in, the prayers I had said, it all seemed to be for nothing. It was a scary place to be. But that day ended up being a turning point for me, because that was the day I decided to stop letting my life be ruled by my thoughts, and I just decided to believe in God. How this came about, in that moment of feeling like I had to give up, I remembered my philosophy course from earlier in the year. At my high school, we had been studying the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, one of my favorite saints, who wrote 5 proofs for the existence of God, making the point that God's existence can be logically demonstrated. Sitting in my room back that day, I thought back to them, since I had been trained to try and use my rational thought process when my mind was running away with itself. I thought about how all of us, everything in creation, relies on something to give it its existence. The songs I sing need me, I need my parents need their parents, and so on. But we all had a beginning. So at some point there must have been something that started them all. Something that is so great that it had no beginning, that it just existed, and that's God. Reading St. Thomas Aquinas and other authors like him helped me calm myself down and to see that there is indeed more to the world than just what is contained in my own brain. But it has also helped me to see that sometimes I don't understand God. He says that his thoughts are not my thoughts, and his ways are not my ways. Reading the Bible and studying the teachings of the church has also helped me to see that I really don't understand God because he's so much greater than I can comprehend. But that doesn't mean that he's not good, and that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. Then on Christmas Day, 2018, my parents told us that they were expecting again. Not only that, but the baby was due on July 25th, what would have been Jacinta's first birthday. A few months later, on the Feast of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, my mom delivered Zelly, who is now 3 years old and one of the cutest kids I've ever seen in my life. To this day, I don't know why God allowed Jacinta to die, but I know that now both Jacinta and Zelly get to exist, and I hope that one day I'll be able to be in heaven with both of them. God truly does give good gifts. He is the source of every good, but sometimes we just have to train ourselves to see it. I know I did. God didn't say that following him would be easy. He actually said, "Take up your cross daily and follow me." But he also will not let us be tested beyond our strength. He always gives us the grace to bear our trials. Life can be full of really hard things. In my case, death, anxiety, hopelessness. But even though God allowed me to experience these things, he always gave me the grace to help bear them, even if I didn't see it. He gave me a very loving mother and a solid dad. He gave me sisters who are my best friends in the world, and he gave me the cutest, most awesome siblings on the planet. He gave himself to me in the Holy Eucharist every single day and never, ever stops loving me. He never stopped listening to my prayers, even though I thought he had. He helped me that day when I wanted to give up. And honestly, because of the suffering, I've come to know and rely on his love in a deeper way. He died on a cross for me, and no Prince Charming has done that. So there's been a desire on my heart to share the Lord's love with others and the joy that I found in living with him, because it actually is pretty epic. This desire brought me to Holy Family Mission, and it's been a blessing to be here these past few months, despite homesickness and some slight language differences. But I've been able to come to know his love in my heart in a deeper way, through the help and encouragement of others, through the example of the community around me, and spending time, most importantly, with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. I've had the opportunity to grow more in the knowledge of God's love for me and in trusting that he is good, even when I don't understand. Even though I decided that day to stop letting my thoughts take over, I don't always do it. It's a work in progress, but praise God for it. Thank you so much for your time and letting me share my story with you.